Good afternoon, and welcome to this little session. So, who in the room thinks that repacking a reserve every 6 months isn't necessary and that we should just do it once a year?
I don't know the answer to the question.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay. Just an interesting thing, because we did a show of hands at the end of the last session yesterday, and we then thought, well, I wonder if we started with that, what would we get? And I wonder if we were doing this downstairs with the Red Devils or whatever going on next day in the theatre, and we did that, whether not we would get something different. But are we preaching to the converted, or we're preaching to the curious? So that's fine as well. So that's the area we're looking at, and I'm not here to say we should do this or we shouldn't do this. Part of our brief is really just to kind of open up the debate, draw in the evidence, and come up with things. One of the things historically that council are trying to change, and have been over the last few years with good governance and everything else, is 4 blokes sitting around a table having a good idea, voting it, and that's policy, isn't the way to do things. So we should be doing things evidentially based, and if I come up with a good idea, I should present a paper explaining why I think this is a good idea, and somebody else can present a paper going, this is why I don't think it's a good idea, and then the decision makers can then put the two things together and balance it all up. That's the process that I'm trying to head towards. So I drafted a little paper, put it out to some riggers, little problem there, and then came back to riggers committee, and I decided I didn't want to vote on it because we hadn't put it out wide enough, it hadn't had time, and at that point I hadn't had any written responses back. So since then I've had a couple. So, okay, let's have a little look at what we're talking about. The debate, the pros and cons of it all. So a little bit of history. 1978, the FAA, America, went over to a 120-day cycle. In 1992, a little bit on that. Why did they change? Silk canopies were packed every 60 days. Nylon canopies opened as reliably after 120 days as they did after 60 days. So how did they know that? I haven't got access to that data. So who was not packing them every 60 days and just packing them after 120 days? So I'm not quite sure how they gain that data, and it's one of those things about how do you know this is okay until you try doing it. So what's the test program? Anyway, in 1992, we introduced the checklist. So we changed the pack cycle. When I first started packing reserves, it was, can you pack my reserve for me? Yeah, you pulled the reserve out, you flaked it out because it was around, and you folded it back and you pressed it in and you closed it back again. All the inspection process, all the bits and pieces that was good practice, wasn't written down in any easily accessible form. So we introduced the record of inspection, the MOT sheet that we now have. And for the next 6 meetings of riggers, we changed that every meeting because we hadn't quite got it right. Then we settled on something, and a few years later we changed a little bit of it. So, but we introduced that with a slightly different system. Oops, wrong one, there we go. 10 years later, Germany decided that most manufacturers, or at least the ones they went to and asked to, were happy that the rig was packed once a year. So their rule was you pack to the manufacturer's requirements up to 1 year. A couple of years later, France did something similar. And a couple of years after that, they then put out a circular going, look, the reason why we changed to packing once a year is that the inspection process and everything else takes longer than it used to. Systems are more complicated, there's more bits. We want to do the job properly, so we were going to delay it and just do it once a year. Give us your main to look at as well. Don't just hide that away. But I don't think it's a requirement, but it's a recommendation there. And I couldn't translate all of their documents, so Google Translate's good up to a point, but there is only so much I can cope with. 2008, the Americans finally caught up and went to 6 months. There were a couple of countries out there was more than France and Germany, that had already gone to 12 months, but they hadn't been at 12 months for that long. So when the Americans were looking at the evidence, they kind of went, well, there's no evidence that more than 6 months, more than 180 days, that's there, apart from the one study for the Navy and similar, which I'll mention on later on. So, but they didn't really ask the question about why not longer than 180 days. And maybe because the PIA had asked the FAA to change to 6 monthly 10 years earlier and had got shot down in flames, that when the FAA asked the PIA whether they thought 6 months was a good idea, they're just going, yeah, that'll do. You know, that's what we wanted in the first place. So if you don't ask the question, you don't necessarily get the evidence. 2017, so a little bit later, Australia moved to 12 months for experienced jumpers. Had a couple of conversations with Australia, because they're English, it's easy, you can speak almost the same language. And they said, please don't do what we did, because they went, for our equivalents, they went B license, and then they went, that's just really awkward with the A license thing, so let's make the division. Tandems and students are one thing, and kit used by experienced people, licensed jumpers, that's something else, and that's where they wanted to divide. So I said, well, you've done that now for a couple of years. What's happened? And they went, no, we're happy. You know, and I said, what about tandems? And they went, most of our tandems land on the beach. We ain't changing. And it's like, okay. So we've had some feedback. Germany came back to me with some useful stuff. So we've had some feedback back. So every few years, riggers get to think about this. When Germany went, Tony Butler asked us to think about it. And then a few years later, we had another think about it. And then a couple of years later, ago, somebody raised the question, is it time for us to change? And we've been thinking about it. And should we make a working group? Or should we just do this? Or should I just write a paper and throw it out there? And then consult and put the idea out and see where other people is. Let's build up a bit of evidence behind it. So this is where we're at the moment. Is it time for us to change, or are we happy with where we are? What do manufacturers say? Well, we keep coming back to what PD say, because PD are actually very useful, and they make some of their data accessible to us. And they did their recertification studies and bits and pieces of permeability test on canopies. Have a look at it. It is actually quite readable and everything else. And where the permeability gets affected when you're packing a canopy, and guess what? It's the center cell. When you're lying on it and you're pushing it around and you're dragging bits and pieces. And sometimes it's the cell, if you side pack it tends to be that side, and they kind of did some useful stuff. But the conclusion was, or the observation in this case, it is clear that packing of the reserve greatly affects the permeability and subsequently the performance of the canopy. So the more times you pack it is what's affecting it. Now in your main canopy, the greatest thing that's affecting it is sunlight. Now, we shouldn't be exposing our reserves to sunlight, so limit the UV damage to it. But it's the handling and the packing that damages things. So when we were packing canopies every 60 days or 90 days, we were packing it a lot of times, so we've changed that. Now we're packing it every 6 months. Do we need to? Or can we reduce the amount of time that we're handling it? Anyway, so that was from PD. So they are happy that you pack it 40 times. Okay, then it goes back for recertification.
Sorry, so does permeability affect the life of the reserve, and or does it affect the speed of opening? Because to me, the life of a reserve is, to be honest, it's irrelevant. If I have to buy one more often, I have to buy one more often. What I'm concerned about is the speed of the reserve.
Yeah, so the answer is yes to both questions. And basically, when they're making canopies, they will specify what the permeability of the material has to be, and it falls within certain bits, the flow of air through the material. I could tell you things, but I have to look it up, caught me out. And the French is slightly different to the PD, but they're all kind of there or thereabouts. And They have the facilities to check that permeability when it goes back. They've got the machinery to do the vacuum testing and everything else. They have the machinery where they can do fluorescence testing to see how much UV damage has been done on bits and pieces. Your average rigging room does not, so, and will never have. So they're quite happy that 40 pack jobs get done, send it back, and we will inspect it. And they go back, and we've now seen quite a few. Gary sent off quite a lot, and they've come back. And the first few always seem to be coming back with a line set on. So it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But now we're getting some back where they haven't done a complete line set because they haven't needed to. And some of them come back with an extra 10 repacks. And some come back with an extra 20 repacks. And we have seen them come back with a whole new label sewn on. So 40 more repacks. Which, under the current American-British system, if you're not using it, means it's going to go to 40 years old if you're packing it twice a year. Okay, so age may not be the big issue. They seem to think handling is a big issue. Up to 1 year repack cycles are allowed. Aerodyne, exactly the same. They differ a little bit in the number of uses. You can't use an Aerodyne reserve as often as you can use a PD canopy before it has to go back, just so you know. Parachutes to France, Arazur or Safran as they're best known now. They're the same as PD. And you can send the reserves back. Don't know anybody that's ever sent one back to PD yet. No, okay. So you can't get emails out of them, so you're reluctant to send them a canopy. You might never see it again. Paratech, their manual says within 12 months. Strong says with 365 days repack cycles authorised. Icarus canopies up to 1 year. So the Germans have approached all the manufacturers because that's what their rule says. It's like what the manufacturer says. So I've got their little table of all the manufacturers and what they say and everything else. So lots of manufacturers are content that it could be there for a year and then you need to inspect it. So what other studies have been done? Well, as I mentioned, when the FAA were looking at extending theirs, they were looking at studies, and the US Navy and a company called Simula did a study of vacuum-packed parachutes. Now, I wasn't quite sure what that was, so I'm suspecting that's head boxes, so ejector seat parachutes maybe. But their study of that, and they were all packed for 7 years before they kind of undid them, and they found that that was absolutely fine. And the FAA, Federal Register, makes the comment that that we were only looking for 180 days, and they're saying 5 years is absolutely fine. So, woohoo, you know. So there is one study that says that. Safran and Kamiński, a couple of engineers from Poland, they did a study on the degradation of nylon, and again, it was the folding, it was the handling that was doing the damage, not the length of time it was sitting somewhere. We'll come to dinosaurs in a little while. I like the dinosaurs. All will become clear.
When you say effect, does that mean as in the time to deploy?
As in both the permeability, which then affects the time to deploy. So it's mostly the permeability of the canopy, so the ability of it to hold the air, and that then affects everything else. So.
I'm guessing you're going to come to this, but what are the reasons for ever repacking it? And what goes wrong when it's sitting on the canopy?
Okay, a good point. We'll see if we cover that. Come back to me on that one. Okay. Other countries then, I've mentioned most of them. Karen produced this for her own benefit a couple of years back about when you're doing kit and docks at various events, and she was the rigger at the Kenya Boogie, so we've just got to see what things are happening. So various things. Portugal is now 12 months. Yeah. We're in the process of changing then, and things. And some of them, they've got to have a little check, and some of them are 12 months. Nobody's gone beyond that. Denmark is a bit strange because it's kind of, is it up to 18 months or bits and pieces? They don't really work on a 12-month season, so it's kind of the whole thing with the Scandinavian countries who went over 6 months quite early is about, let's just get through the season, and if it's 7 months, why are we worrying about doing it for there. So different countries have had different reasons. We always tend to look at what the FAA do, but they weren't leading the way when we went to 6. So there we go. Okay. So what's the drawback? Why don't we just leave it in there all the time? And people have different ideas about what the drawbacks might be. And that's part of one of the things that we're trying to look out and for and everything else. Does the closing loop get damaged, worn, stretched, etc., sitting there? Should it? Really? It depends on what the user's using the kit for. Was it set pre-stretched or not pre-stretched when you measured it? Was the loop length the right amount when we started? Was it replaced like is good practice? Was it being used? Sitting there, being jumped, why is the loop getting damaged? So when you pack a parachute, it's got full of air. So over the first couple of days after a repack, that air is going to displace a little bit, and then it gets to a certain point when it doesn't really change. So what is the issue there? So, but yeah, loops. We've probably all seen rigs where you kind of go and you press the top flap and the pin is loose. Now, whether that was because the loop wasn't set properly in the first place, or it was just a poor pack job. Really, it really doesn't stretch that much. So it's like, where's the problem? And why would it be more of a problem on month 10 than it was on month 5? It's like, okay. But that's maybe something we need to consider. The amount of time it's been contaminated by other things. So it's only being inspected once a year. That's a whole year of lying around the boot of your car and doing bits and pieces. Well, is that really my responsibility as the packer, or is that your responsibility as the user of that parachute? So, come back with another point on that one in a minute. Okay, so they're just some of the things, and we're just kind of looking at areas. Okay, what about what happens to your main over 12 months? Well, that's a different kettle of fish altogether, isn't it? And what about your kill line? That kind of like shrunk now and it needs replacing. Well, tell you what, that's not on the inspection sheet. Most of us do check those things when we do a reserve, but you could cut it away, or I could inspect this one, and then Esther gets rid of her newly arrived 0 and sticks the old tea bag back on, and it's just like, well, I've inspected this, but she's got a packing certificate etched in vellum. And she can put that on herself. So it's just like, well, it's nothing, which is why we took mains away from the record of inspection in the first place. Because if I'm signing, I've checked it, and they walk out and they just swapping the canopy over, what have I checked? I checked it at the time, but I changed that. However, consider your MOT. You have to have your car MOT'd every year if you don't have a brand new one. And what does that MOT check? It checks the brakes, it checks the tyres, and what have you. Passes the MOT, you go round to your mate, you take the tyres off, you give him his tyres back on, you put your war tyres back on, and you drive off again. Is that the garage's fault? No, when it left the garage, it was serviceable. When the police stop you down the road, a mile away, well, you've just had the MOT. Have you got away with those tyres? Because they weren't the tyres that were on. It's not the garage's fault, it's the user's fault.
Don't you keep a record of what canopy was in when you done the reserve or pack job? Because that's what we do in Norway. You would check the main and everything, and if you change the canopies, you have to get that checked. There's no way around that.
So our packing certificate holders are qualified to assemble their own main parachutes. So they're entitled to do it. So where would be the record of that? And things, they only sign their own. It's just, okay. I'm not saying that that's not areas that you do. You can.
I'm an advocate, bang the drum a lot about the fact that the main isn't mentioned in the document, and for all the good reasons, that's the way that document is. However, I also teach people on my watch as packers and riggers that where it says comments, you don't put the whole 9 yards in there about, oh, by the way, that's frayed, watch it until next time. Risers cut in half, look after that mate, because that's sort of what they used to do. What I do tell them to do is a carbon copy. I said, but you need a record of what that was the day you did we used to call that document the MOT, because it's exactly what it is. And the small print at the bottom says, at the time of inspection, it looks okay to me. That's what we sign. It doesn't say it's going to be any good. It clearly states this does not mean it's all right tomorrow morning. So I say, so the state you checked it in, for legal reasons, in court of law, you want to be sure about that. So I write in the comment, the main, the batch number on the cutaway pad now, I add more and more detail, anything with a serial number in there that's not on the already, and it's mostly the main. It was like this when I put the whole 9 yards in, date of manufacture on the main, the lot, and the state it was in. Not for him, but although I have to say, when they go abroad, lose their kit and want an insurance claim, my God, they're glad I wrote all that down, because you've, of course, kept a record of your main documents, haven't you? You know exactly the serial number. You could tell me right now. No. So there's an insurance claim dropped by a quarter of the value of the rig straight away when it gets nicked. But my document has it. And I've got a carbon copy, so he can do what he wants. But the day I inspected it, that's what I inspected. And that's what I do and tell people to do. But it's not the rule.
Yeah. Okay. What about the currency of packers? We go to packing once a year. Does that mean that we won't have current packers? What happens, I believe, at the moment is that most drop zones in the UK do not have a 12-month packing, jumping cycle. There are a couple of exceptions with concrete runways, but even then, there's a peak and a trough. So there will be people at Langer who do not jump all 12 months, but they're looking at it and going, oh yeah, no, Easter, oh, there's that thing going on, right, okay, yeah. Everybody wants their reserve packed in the third week of March, okay? Nobody wants their reserve packed the third week of January. That's good, we had last week off. Yeah, well, actually, I was pointing at Gary, but it's not him. Marianne's packed 28 reserves so far this year, so, you know, it's just like, so somebody wants them packed at that time. But for most of the packers in the room, we haven't, you know, because it's going to sit there for a month or two. And, you know, if you're going abroad, if you're going to America, woohoo, you need to get it packed by an FAA rigger. So we have one in the room. Yeah, there's 3 in the country at the moment. A couple of weeks, hopefully we'll have another one. So at the moment, we've got peaks and troughs of when that packing needs to be done. If we went to a 12-month cycle, it wouldn't matter. You'd leave me your kit for over the winter, and whether I packed it the week before Christmas or the week after Christmas isn't going to matter, and you're not going to jump it for a couple of months, because it's going to see you through the season. That's what people want, and it's just like, and people are thinking, can I get away with one repack? You know, I'm actually going to jump over 6 months only, so I really want to pack it the day before I pick it up, you know, and it's like, come on, you know, everybody wants it packed on a Friday. Nobody wants you to pack it on a Monday, you know. And it's like, so we're forced to do all our packing in a short space of time, and then we have bits when we're not doing any packing. So that's not good for currency that way. So I don't think it's so much a numbers thing as spread out my workload, and I can do a better job, which is what the French model was. You know, it's going to take you longer to do this inspection. That's why we've gone to a year. Give us your main so we can do that as well, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do the job better. But does that mean some people wouldn't be current and you wouldn't have as many advanced packers out there? I don't know. We had 40 advanced packers qualify this year, so there are plenty of people coming in. Will they stay current? See?
Would you not just keep a number of like how many packs they have to do to keep their like?
Yeah. So interesting. Different countries have different things. Slightly off topic here about currency, but I think our currency guidelines, which I wrote very, very vaguely for a very good reason. I don't like numbers game. And if I said, right, you must pack 10, and somebody packs 10 today and tomorrow, and then doesn't pack for the rest of the year, or somebody's only packed 9, but they've done that every 5 weeks, who do you want to pack your reserve? You know, and it's just like, so, but I think that we may have to go that way and things. Interestingly, the FAA system, correct me if I'm wrong, is there is no recertification. Nobody signs you off every year like we do in this country. But you must have been a rigger 90 of the previous 365 days. However, packing a main for somebody else must be done by a rigger. So that would be the equivalent of all our tandem packers being riggers packing. And did they pack for more than 90 days in the last year? Yeah, that'll be, you haven't seen a reserve, but you've been working as a rigger for 90 days. So,
Is that right, Pete? I thought it was that you only had to do some rigging on the previous 90 days, the same as like a pilot career.
no, it's 90 out of the previous year,
90 out of the previous year, is it?
I think. I hope, because the exam's coming up.
Have you got the card?
I've got my card.
I think it's written on the card.
Would you want me to read my card?
It's on the card. It's on the card.
Read?
Anyway, my point was really like whatever that is, what defines rigging for that qualification? So they've got a number
Have to do something in the previous
thing. So maybe we need to build something in for our AP so we define what current is. And some of the suggestions from other countries is actually the Australia, for instance, theirs is every 2 years they get signed up, but they have to do so much every 6 months or something. But it's not very many, but there's something. I think. Okay. Anyway.
Keep talking whilst I read.
Yeah. Need magnifying glass now as well. So.
Issued a year ago, and it's for life. No one will ever. And I'm told it can be taken off me by an enforcement officer.
Yes, or a federal
Cuts
officer.
can go on. If I cock up. They were great things to tell me that.
But you like handcuffs, though, don't you?
Stop it. I was younger then and I needed the money.
Come on.
No, don't say all that. No. It just I've been found properly qualified to exercise the privileges of.
Okay.
Blah, 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 blah.
Okay. Anyway. So what other drawbacks can we think of? And do we have enough data of those things? Anybody got any other things that's a drawback to extending the pack cycle? Yes, Andy.
It's interesting that we haven't mentioned
Yeah, for the video.
For the vid.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can hear. Okay. It's interesting that we haven't mentioned things like grommets on the reserve tray. Sharp grommets during use, being thrown around on the drop zone, thrown in the boot of your car, they can make abrasions on the loop. Okay, and the amount of times I've popped reserves and they've had sharp grommets is quite staggering. Also, sometimes the actual cutter on the AAD, the casing of it has been crushed and there's a sharp edge on that. Now, is there a problem with the 6-month system at the moment? No. Are we putting people more at risk by sticking to the 6-month system? No. Are we putting people more at risk going to an extended period of time? Yes. So that's my
I think your point about hidden wear. First response on that one would be, well, obviously the last packer didn't do a great job, and that brings us to the point about, well, if you're opening every 6 months you've got a chance of finding that mistake. However, that's twice as many opportunities somebody is of making that mistake, and we shouldn't be doing that in the first place. So where do you have to legislate for that? But I think in terms of when we put loops up on the board, that is the point about, what can affect a loop. And yes, maybe a missed thing. When we were looking at the packing of the Javelin yesterday, if you're not using the sky hook, what do you do with the flap? Well, you just pack it in the same way as if you were using the skyhook, because if you stick it anywhere else, then the flap and the grommet may come in contact with the loop in a place where you're not looking. How much wear and tear it gets, you know, the rigs are designed to be packed and left and no wear and tear, but we know we've had rigs in the past where we've suspected that vibration, the next tandem or whatever, so we looked at the loops regularly and then went, yeah, it's not a problem from there, but we need to look at it. So I think that's a possible downside, is that the unseen damage has longer to do long-term damage to something.
Sorry, can I be devil's advocate for a second?
Please do, Phil.
Yeah, sorry. Just in reply to your point, no, I think the sharp edges is really valid, but a sharp edge isn't going to get sharper in 12 months compared to 6, is it? It's sharp to begin with.
No, but it's there longer.
Yeah, but if it's there in the first place, it's because someone did a crap inspection. It's not connected to the length of the repack cycle. It's not a connected factor.
The damage to the grommet is not affected. It's not connected to the length of the repack cycle.
Yeah, that's all my point.
But if there is some vibration against the loop of that,
It's there twice as long.
then
Yeah.
potentially there's
No,
a little bit there.
I think that's perfectly sensible, but I think it comes down to good inspection practices rather than.
Perfect trackers and riggers, then
Yeah.
there would be more justification, but the human factor means there are peripheral things to consider.
Yeah. No, I think there's both points are valid there.
So, gentlemen, what would be one thing that would be good about moving to annual inspections? Okay, we need microphone back.
Oh, sorry.
Just because I want this just to be me and my opinion. So this is great. We're all kind of trying things in.
Short background to what he, first of all, 90 days within 12 months. That is he looked it up. 0.0. So, small notes. I love car analogies. But he's already stolen that. But yeah, MOTs, cars, rules and regs about cars are a pretty good analogy. It is down to the value of the MOT and the level and standard of the person that did that MOT, or did they do one of those MOTs? We all know these people. So I would counter or offer that, in actual fact, I have got some knowledge of a lot of other rigging, several other rigging fraternities across the world, and even the military one in this country. And I can assure you that the UK level of packing and rigging is way, way, way up there. Without decrying what I did in America a year ago, I went over 3 weeks, came back with the rigger examiners. But as I said in one of the briefings last year about my experience of flying to America, one of our reserve packers could have also come back with a master rigger rating from America. That's, in my opinion, it's not that hard. They do not make a single manufactured component. They just fix things. And the little bits of fixings they do are quite limited. The vast majority of our rigger training is about building components. And as a consequence of that, by the time we're at advanced rating and building the rigs, the Americans are falling over in a dead faint that we've dared to build our own parachute system and jump it, because they can't conceive of that concept and think we're absolutely mad. But we're at that level by the time we're advanced riggers. By the time we're gods with rigger examiners t-shirts on, lightning bolts are coming out of everything. It's fantastic feeling. Jedi, Sith Lords. So our standard's very, very high. Our MOTs are really, really good. Yeah. And to the best of my knowledge, we don't have anybody in our sport, limited as it is, that is wandering around the country doing crap MOTs on the cars, if you know what I mean. So there's that point there. What we do have, from the PD end particularly, is hard evidence that we're the ones that actually degrade the parachutes. Parachutes degrade more from handling than, I would argue, than from actual opening. It doesn't wear them out as much as you'd think. But us handling the thing is what changes things. And it's not just about the opening speed, to take your point about permeability and that. It's about the flare. I'm going to take a wild guess that you don't do all your normal skydives, with the exception of a few, on a chuggy old F111 7-cell main. You flare on a God knows what, a shot slider, VF 66, 70 foot thing that I'm never even going to go near. And when the reserve cranks out, for those of you who've had a reserve ride, you're back on an old 1970s 7-cell design of canopy, a great big thick corded thing. And you need that to flare quite well at the end of it, because or just land with the brakes still on, because you're still going, what happened there? Because the Cypress or the AAD has gone off. You might not even be going on the toggles to flare anything. And then that permeability, which sounds a bit wishy-washy at first, suddenly that's really, really important. Not even the students do 7-cell jumps on their first static lines. And a little 7-cell F111 or permeable canopy is not going to land. And there's been many, many talks over the years about taking a chance not to just jump a PD super duper racing snake when they're on your drop zone, but to get one of their reserves and put a jump in on that and experience what it is to fly an old school canopy, because you'll need it in the last few seconds as you touch down, having woken up, having been knocked unconscious, and you've just got time to put the brakes on and land. And that's when the permeability thing's suddenly really quite important. Next. Any repack cycle is a max number. 180 days is not, when I pack your reserve, I don't give it to you and say, don't forget now, don't bring it back until it's 179 days. I don't want to see you. You can go to the drop zone, and we have these gates in the system. We have flight line checking. We have scrutineering of kit when it gets on the drop zone. Flight line checking is a big deal, and it's possibly something we should need to have a good hard look at. Who's doing that flight line check? Are the briefs at the is it A to B license? I can't keep up. But all these briefs about, oh, here's how you do your flight line check, here's how you spot, by the way, here's how you're a jump master. Is the camera on? I think that's complete crap, because that's the only time most of those jumpers are ever going to be turned loose as a jump master, is when they're briefed about it. And then they might not even have any intention of being in command of an aircraft with up to 20 people in it. Again, ditto the flight line check thing. Whatever they think they do and teach you about flight line check, it's a really, really big deal, and you've got to know your kit. So there's a massive educational piece there to make sure that when people do a flight line check, it doesn't go all together now, say after me, happy with your top, happy with your bottom, and the guy's holding up, you know, and all that, and that's and a cursory look that he's actually wearing the thing, and that's it. That ain't a flight line check. So that's a massive, massive gate. That could have happened 5 minutes after reserve repack happened, and yes, there could be a frayed loop. So it's not about the time. It can be found 2 minutes after the reserve repack. It could be found 50 minutes or 5 years after the reserve repack. The time is not what caused that trouble. What you did with your kit is what caused that trouble. Where you took it, did you store it in the car and rust it to death for a year? That'll take it off the flight line. Yada, yada, yada. So it's a max number. It doesn't mean it has to stay in for a year. If there is a problem, we could have a gate that we put in. It's not a problem. We can do what we want. We're our own country still. We could have a situation where we go, all right, let's try this with expert equipment, licensed jumpers. Let's try that one. Let's put a 6-month gate in where it goes back to the packer or is inspected by a packer, as with the COVID business. There was a little interim gate of get it checked externally. We could put that in there. And say, well, okay, but it gets that check there. And if at a certain point, as with any other day of the week, there's a problem, it goes back to and the reserve has got to come out to fix that problem. It goes back to that person, who then has the right, under our law, to open that reserve and do whatever he needs to do to get it right. So those gates are there, irrespective of the time we have the thing packed. That's enough for now.
Yeah, so Gary, in terms of that interim check, we had this during COVID. As we came out of COVID, there was the ability for us to extend people's repacks because the rig's just been sitting there for whatever, not in the care of riggers usually, just basically sitting in their rooms. And there was a debate about who's responsible for that if we're extending it. Who should extend that? Should it only be the person who packed it originally, so it has to go back to the original packer, or can somebody else go, I've done the external check and I'm happy, it all looks okay. And then who's responsible for the bit afterwards? But Gary, you got something to say on responsibility of that, or how we do things in the town?
Give it to Rick. Yeah, so I would be a firm advocate if we went down this route that we would have a an interim period that we would inspect the equipment, a 6-month inspection or set by a jump number. All right. So there is a system in place that's currently there for our tandems. All right. And our tandem systems have what's called a 100 jump check. So even though it's packed and it's certified for use for 6 months, after 100 jumps it has to go off and get inspected. But it does not have to be inspected by the person who initially packed it. Okay, so it pretty much consists of the same inspection regime that we would use when packing your reserve. All right? The only difference is we don't pull the handle. Your reserve, your pin, your closing loop stays where it is. Clearly, if there's an issue with the reserve, the pin, or the closing loop, then it comes out and it gets repacked. All right? And if we don't do that, so if I'm inspecting a rig that's rig-packed, and we don't want me to pull the pin because then I've got to repack the reserve, well, then I just send the whole system back to Rick. Because, like he's just mentioned, he can pull the pin, all right? He can replace the closing loop, and he can replace the pin and put the whole system back in. It's 10, 15 minute job as opposed to 4 or 5 hours. All right. And that's the sort of system which I believe would assist, yeah, or work quite well as far as making sure that our kit stays serviceable. All right. Now, we get quite a few rigs come through my loft. And the most parts of wear and tear that we see tend to be kill lines. Right? If I did anything in a whole week, there's going to be a kill line involved. Right, so easy. So what happens if our kill line breaks? Anyone?
Nothing catastrophic.
Just
Piloting still works.
Piloting still works. Right. So it's inconvenient at best. Right. However, if our kill line shrinks, what it can do is damage the top of the bridle. Right? It's quite easy to see, but then everything's easy when you know how. Right. So if you know what you're looking for, you can actually see if your kill line is creating damage to your kit. So kill line, that's fine. Next thing typically would be a pilot chute. Right? Now, you don't send your kit in for us to pack it. Now look, I go, I need a steak tonight, so I'm going to tell him that his pilot chute needs doing. Right. Normally what happens is you would already tell me that there's something wrong with your deployment. Right? And it normally comes down the route of my deployments are getting funky. Right? Or I had one the other day, the rest of my team's got a bit of an issue with the fact that it's taking 1,500 feet for my canopy to deploy properly. Can you fix it? I mean, oh, sure, I'll change the pilot chute for you. Right. So that's a real good key, a real good way of finding out how old your pilot chute is. And this has got a big, massive rip in. Right? And I think any of us can see that. And then we can move down. Bridle tends to go, I only make about, I don't know, 50, 20, 30 bridles a year, so don't do that many. Right. But it's the rest of them. The bridles, the kill lines, the pilot chutes. Now, you will come to me when you know that there's an issue. Right? Because you don't like that deployment, because you don't like that opening. So it's, even if it's not due a repack, right, we can still repair the systems. The rest of the wear and tear, right, will be stuff if you do have a hard landing and you go screaming down the runway on your back, right, you're not going to, hopefully, put your rig back on and go for another jump. Right? You will get somebody to look at that. That's just common sense. It's what people do. Right? I have had it once, really, where the guy got up and just left the rig lying in the middle of the packing hall. Right? I bet you he walked out with a limp, right? Because of the way that kit was trashed. But that's clear and easy to see. Right. So, if we break this repack cycle, or this 12 months, into 2 groups, all right, where we have the reserve that's closed for 12, but then the system is still inspected in a shorter period. Right? And even if that's not necessary, it might be a good way to start the system, to introduce the system, and then potentially have a review annually to see what's happening with it. Do we need to go stricter? Do we need to go less strict? So there's a lot that we can move on, right, as to whether or not how we're going to run this system, if it ever actually happens.
Yeah, we're kind of starting to run out of time a little bit, aren't we? Yeah. So got a few. Yeah, got a couple of minutes left. Have you got a burning issue, or have we got any question anywhere just there?
I haven't heard much about my original question.
You were great. Okay.
Oh, hang on, yeah, ask the question.
You see, you didn't talk about dinosaurs.
Apart from what you mentioned about sharp edges.
So
Sorry, ask your question again, sorry.
Yeah.
So I can remember what you said.
What's the reason for ever repacking a reserve? Because what goes wrong with it while it's sitting in there? I guessed in the past perhaps it sticks together or something, but I haven't heard that. So what else can go wrong?
If, for example, if the pilot's roof, like the pilot chute spring. This is a complete ignorant. So, but if it's compressed for 6 months, or it's compressed for 12 months, does that affect how far it pushes out into the airflow on deployment? Could that affect?
we'll hand it to a mechanical person.
Okay, no, I'm not going down that route. We recently purchased a Javelin. All right, this Javelin was made 19 years ago, manufactured and assembled in the factory. All right. The owner of said container got to the UK, went to the drop zone, didn't like the attitude that was presented to him, took his brand spanking new rig that he's never jumped and stuck it in his cupboard. All right, we purchased that last year. All right, went through the whole thing, didn't really need that much of an inspection because it's never been jumped. Took the main out, and it was like a brick. All right, we understand that. But when we pulled the reserve handle, it was as if the unit was packed yesterday. Right, and it had been in there for just shy of 20 years.
So that's so this is from a scientific perspective. That's n equals 1, and that's a rig that's sat in a cupboard and not been moved around,
Yes.
jumped.
Yes.
And I suppose so in a real world situation.
Well, your spring's not going to get damaged moving around.
And it can't work its way. Again, I'm just
No.
ignorant. So.
No. It's a close. It's in the box.
Mm.
Right. What we do have, clearly, because it is moving the R vibrations. I wouldn't suggest that is of a proportion that is going to make any difference.
So,
right. The only thing I've ever seen that anyone's done to damage their equipment, right, is leave it in the boot of their car, right, unrestrained. So that bounces all over the place. Mm-hmm. And the damage that they created was they actually broke the control unit on the AAD. The container wasn't damaged at all. Right? Now there was the pin, it was just the control unit, and when we stripped it, that fell off. Right. So that's quite easy because now you're not going to be able to turn the unit on. Right. The only other damage I've ever seen was people sitting on the container while packing. Right, and that eats its way through the reserve closing loop. Right. Only damage I've seen from people, and of course you go down the runway.
Okay. So we still haven't answered your question, have we? You're very polite about it. That's okay.
I think part of that though is if a student lands and it gets muddy, the grid can be in there for a long time and you're not going to see.
Can see?
Yes.
How did you know I was going to do that? Yeah. Okay. Packing and inspection and packing of a parachute originally started because it was not all natural fibres, and natural fibres do not last. They can be eaten by a thing, and things can happen. And and also they needed to be aired. You might have had packing cards. You might still get a packing card where it says AIR, and that's what it's air, inspect and repack. We don't have to air nylon parachutes if they've been in a good world. Airing parachutes is kind of gone. It says we do an inspection and a repack, but it is Noel hit it really. We're really inspecting what's gone on in the last period of time since it was last looked at, and it can often be stuff that's got ingressed in because they're sand, dirt. But we're right back to that thing about the environment that you're using the parachute in. And you call a stop if you rolled on this, if you landed on a beach, or you just had a boogie somewhere on a nice hot and high place, or or you went to Everest with the thing. That's put it into some other environments that we're not so sure about. So maybe you go, well, actually, I'm the owner of this kit, I'm the user, and whether you know it or not, the ops manual clearly says you are responsible, not me. It's your kit, you're responsible for it, not me. So guess what? It's your responsibility to go, hang on a minute. I think I need to take that back now, get it looked at. Closing loops, things, this, that, the other, Velcro, Lord knows what else. BOC pockets, and grit, and where you've been playing. And it's actually your responsibility. But that's what our inspection is looking for, is the standard and the condition of it. And really, hand on heart, I have not tended to go in there and find that many reserves in the 35 years I've been doing this, where the parachute itself's design has suddenly failed in the preceding 6 months. I've had to go in there because the manufacturer has identified a problem, or collectively the world has identified a problem, and we're going in to look at a specific problem. And in some case, we're changing out a component because they've said this is not good. Raven 2s are on the ground until he's put a new bikini slider on them. Now they're a Raven 2B, right B on the data plate, and repack. That's a manufacturer's instruction to do something, and we obviously jump. And tacky fabric, well, yeah, we've got that going on now with Safran. They found one, they had a problem a few years ago, to France Atoms, etc. Black tacky fabric, I worked for the MOD, that cascaded through most of our fleet. We dealt with it, and they've just had another one with one red Cordura parachute, which is a bit tacky. And they're putting us through that now. But they think it's an isolated problem. So those are the things we're going in at and looking at. But actually going in to inspect if it's spontaneously, over that 6 months, change what it can do, that's not what we're looking at. It's conditioned based on what's happened to it, I believe.
Yeah. We're trying to end up with something that's evidentially based. And unfortunately, I can't find the paper, but when I was a new instructor, I was aware of a report that had been done, presumably by the military or by the smoke jumpers, over parachutes that had been packed up to 2.5 years. And the study finished at that point because they ran out of rigs to jump and time the opening of. So in answer to both of your questions, then that study, to my recollection, and I say I can't say it's verbatim because I can't find it, days pre-internet, but what I recall of that study, and I think other people kind of share that remembrance, is that what the graph showed was that in the first month after a pack, a parachute opened slower than it did on day one. In the second month, it's a little bit slower, and after 3 months, it doesn't make any difference. So it gets slower, and then it plateaus. And that plateau continued, and this would be when we went to 3 to 4 months to 6 months, and it's like, well, that's in the plateau. So the plateau continues to 12 months, appeared to continue to 2.5 years, and then they ran out of parachutes to test it on. So probably it will work. 20 years or whatever, it worked. 5 years ago, if you asked me the question, should we think about going to a year, I would have been reluctant. In those past 5 years, due to COVID and a few other things, I have come across several rigs that have been packed for more than 2 years and just been sitting there doing nothing. And I've had opportunity to play with them, see how far the spring goes, see how easy the bag pulls off, put a scale on it if you like, if it felt strong, how easy it comes out of the bag, is there any adhesion, how easy it flops out, and then pack it and do it again, and it looked the same. So then I started to think, we could extend. So do we do what Germany did and go 12 months across the board? Tandem, student, kit, everything. And so I thought, yeah, we could do that. And then part of this discussion process over the last 6 months kind of went on, and I kind of went, duty of care to students, licensed jumpers supposed to know how to look after themselves. Licensed jumpers can make a decision about, actually, you know what? I don't want to leave it 7 years. I don't want to leave it a year. I want to have it packed at the beginning of the season, and then it's fine. It's kind of, that will work for me. And it's like, well, actually, that was a rough landing, or, well, I think I got wet. They kind of, right, okay, I'll get it repacked. You don't have to wait to do that. You've got that choice. Student kit, tandem kit, the user, the end user, doesn't get the choice. So I think we've got a different duty of care. So I then went, okay, we've got to take the student kit and tandem kit out of it. That's my opinion. And that's changed. I went, oh, well, we'll do an inspection. No, just leave it out. So maybe one way forward is if we felt that not only could we do this, but we should, because it extends the life of the parachute, it does less damage to the parachute. Then we do it for licensed jumpers. And we put in a 100 jump check, or a 200 jump check, or a 6 month, or a 100 jump check, or 6 months, whichever comes sooner, kind of check. We could do that, because we've done it with the tandem thing. We could work our way of doing that. And then we could look at that. And we could come back here in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years' time and go, have we had a problem? Has there been an increase in injuries, whatever, incidents of pilot chutes coming off inadvertently, whatever? That would be a way forward if we thought not only that we could do it, but we should. That doesn't answer the question about what's broken with the current system. I think we're doing quite a good job. I think we could do better. I think we could make it better, and this gives us scope to do that job better. That's just my opinion. And what we hopefully will go on from here is that there will be some sort of Google form come out, some sort of thing to come out to everybody and to get some ideas back. I've certainly got to take this idea to around the drop zones, because what happens in my drop zone and what happens at other drop zones is different, so I've got to fit in the colouring a bit of it. I'm not standing here saying I think we should do this. I'm saying I think we need to look at it, and we're inviting ideas back in. And we're out of time, and the next one's got to come in. And
really sorry,
yeah.
The next one's going to start now, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to carry this on outside, but we're pretty much there.
Nice.